Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore some of the biggest challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we analyze the judicial system in Ecuador. On one hand, the government says it is fighting corruption, but on the other, many denounce political persecution without any evidence and how rotten the prison system is in the country. To talk about this, we have journalist Marco Antonio Bravo on his first exclusive interview after being wrongfully imprisoned. But first, let's take a look at this video.
Judge Silvia Sanchez has ordered the release of 5 former employees of the Communication Ministry, popularly known as SECOM. According to the judge, there was no strong evidence against them. The workers have been accused of embezzlement. A comptroller's report revealed SECOM's criminal responsibility for expenses and hiring. 2 of the defendants are Antonio Bravo, former Undersecretary of Institutional Media, and Javier Lemos, former Administrative Coordinator.
It looked like they were forced to act after Fernando Alvarado fled in order to demonstrate that you have to obey the law and fight against corruption, and we paid for that circumstance. The decision from the prosecutor's office was arbitrary and without doubt political in nature.
Lamentably, we were in prison for 77 days. There are 2 people that are still there waiting for the process to finish in the same way as it has with us, which is that it reveals the truth. It's good that we're out and we're with our families, but it doesn't feel good to have been in prison.
The legal team defending Marco Antonio Bravo and Jaime Lemos affirmed that political pressure generated by the case meant that the ex-SECOM employees were accused without any legal foundation.
If they want to bring charges against my clients, then they ought to do it without preventive detention. There is no reason to ask for incarceration, and it's terrible to be detained for 75 days. And then at the end, they recognize that there was no participation in the SECOM contracts. It goes against the rule of law. First of all, you investigate, then if there are charges to be brought, act. That's what should happen. Not prison first, investigate later.
It's a dangerous precedent. The court is jumping to preventative detention as a first course of action. It's a bad precedent to set in the state at a judicial level. There are going to be international consequences for the country.
Judge Silvia Sanchez's ruling against the 5 former officials came following the escape of former Communications Secretary Fernando Alvarado, who fled the country in October 2018. The pre-trial hearing for a number of once prominent figures in the ministry was held on January 23rd, including Fernando Alvarado, former Communications Secretary, Pablo Llanes, former Undersecretary of Communication, Galo Pacheco, former Undersecretary of Institutional Media, and Carlos Bravo, of the Gota Azul production company.
So thank you, Marco Antonio, for being with us. You were in prison for 77 days for something you didn't commit. How is that possible in Ecuador?
Carla, thank you for the space and thank you, Telesur, for this interview. It is possible because politically we're going through a difficult moment in Ecuador. Unfortunately, political passions are still very deep. I think that those who should not have paid for it have done it. In a specific case, I was in jail for 77 days for charges that were never proved on behalf of the District Attorney's Office and National Court of Justice in a process against workers of the Communications Secretariat that worked during the government of President Rafael Correa, where we worked. I'm a journalist with many years of trajectory and experience, and I've worked as such in the government. There were 2 contracts during this time, and they used these contracts to charge us on a possible case of corruption that was never proved and has now been proven against justice, and I have been now cleared.
You're not the only person that is involved in this case that was accused of something they didn't do. How many more people are involved in this?
Well, in the process, there were 10 people, 8 former workers of the Communications Secretary and 2 service providers, managers of different companies. And after the first stage, where the District Attorney's Office did not accuse 5 people, 4 people have been left. The Communications Secretary, the Vice Minister of Communication, I'm speaking about Fernando Almarado and Paulo Llanes, a service provider called Carlos Bravo, that's my brother, and Patricia Pacheco, the Undersecretary of Media that replaced me when I left the Communications Secretary. The rest of the people have been cleared definitely. So out of the 9 people that were involved and were linked to the cases, there's only 4. And during the next days, they will have to face a trial, and if justice determines so, follow a trial if required.
Some irregularities throughout the process. Can you go through a couple of them?
Indeed, the General Attorney's Office opened a case of penal responsibility in February, and they sent a report to the Office of the Prosecutor. At this moment, we were thinking about 2 contracts. A $12,000 contract signed by the Secretariat with someone who provided services, and then the other one to improve the Enlace Ciudadano. It was a contract with Satre company for $50,000. With the first $12,000 contract, they wanted to link me because apparently I was the manager of the contract, or I had requested the contract. But I was no longer a functionary of the Communications Secretariat. So that's why the General Attorney's Office looked for a link that I apparently had with this type of contract, and also with my brother Carlos Bravo, to see if there was any type of link with my brother. So nothing was ever proved that I had something to do with my brother, who was the provider to SECOM and to the presidency. Now, after this, there was the case of Satre. In the case of Satre, the only thing I did was to request the contract on request of Fernando Almarado, and also request the resources in order to establish a contract. And when I did not get an answer at a given time by the authorities of SECOM and the presidency, I requested the legal department of SECOM the way in which this contract should have been paid. And then there was an agreement for payment because the process took so long and the consultancy was about to finish their work. This contract had to be paid for, so I requested this contract to be covered. Later, I left the country. I traveled with the president, and during that moment, another worker, another person of SECOM, signed the documents as the documents for the request and the receiving document, and he signed under my name and under my position. This had to be determined at a given point by a graphologic exam. It took place. There was a term that I had nothing to do with these contracts. So summarizing, I had nothing to do in one case because I was not working with SECOM, and in the other case, the only thing I did was to request a contract on behalf of the Communications Secretary and reach the levels that I had to reach by requesting the documents that needed to be requested legally.
You were taken into a prison. How is that possible? And do you see this as possibly a political persecution or a prison due to political terms?
Unfortunately, I see that justice in Ecuador, the resource that they're using is of prison. It's not the last resort. Someone who is accused of something is sent to jail, is sent to custody, even though there are other options beyond pretrial detention. The Communication Secretary was not sent into custody. his control was established in such a way where he could not leave the country, but there was no pre-trial detention for him. But he took away the electronic device, left the country, and immediately Ecuadorian justice requested custody for the rest of us who were part of this case, even though we're not even linked to it. First, we were linked to it, and then custody was requested for all of us with no discrimination. So facing the circumstances, in my case specifically, I had already spoken to my family, and I had told them that should there be any charges against me, and if the National Court of Justice would request pretrial detention against me, I was going to turn myself in. I'm not going to escape, because first of all, I don't consider myself guilty, and secondly, I don't consider that I've done anything wrong. That's why I cannot escape and also cannot defend myself from abroad. First of all, I do not have the economic conditions to do so, and then I do not consider myself as someone making a mistake in order to flee the country and not to face justice. I faced justice. I was in jail for 77 days. I think there were pressures, without a doubt, but at the end of the day, justice, when there's a lack of evidence, clear evidence, dismissed my case.
Are you thinking about probably suing the state for the damage done to you, to your name, to your family, the time taken away from you?
Well, my honor was really affected, and it would be very difficult for them to be refunded with money, because here attacking the honor of someone is very easy. There is a matrix of communication, and someone is accused of certain different things that have not been done, but they do so in such a way as some kind of way of working of the media was previously in the communication law, and they end the honor of the people, not only of those cases like mine where I was unfairly accused, but also my family. I am yet to make a decision about this. I am still analyzing this, and at some point I will announce my decision whether I make a decision about this or not. It's yet too early to think about this. Only 2 weeks have gone by after I've left the prison, and it's still difficult times trying to become once again part of a society. Believe you me that there are still certain things that I'm doing for the first time after a long period of time. For example, drinking some coffee, eating typical food as encebollado, which was something that I did often, also eating hamburgers or maybe sandwiches, because time behind bars was very difficult, not only due to precarious conditions. My cell was of 3 square meters. There were 9 people there. You can imagine what this means, being from 9 to 5 in a single cell. And if you have biological needs, well, you cannot go ahead with them. The condition of food was terrible, very little food, terrible taste. It was not nourishing, and there are still a lot of things that I'm analyzing today. It was very difficult to swallow. I'm getting over it little by little. Psychologically, it's going to take longer, because there are certain times where, for example, I'm driving after 3 months, and if you see either a police officer, a member of the army, you become paralyzed, because once again you remember the time, the moment where you were behind bars, where I saw my little girl and she saw me going to jail. So you still feel a trauma that I have not been yet able to overcome. So there are still certain things that I'm working on, that I'm living through still, and I'm still thinking about the rest. I have not made a decision about this.
Conditions that you were in. No coincidence that at the time that you were in prison, there were a lot of reports on media about the bad conditions of the prisons in Ecuador. Are they true? There were a lot of reports about overpopulation, overcrowding inside the prisons.
Those are real news, but I think that overcrowding in jails is not only because the numbers of crime have increased in Ecuador, but I think that it's also due to the way in which justice is being managed in our country. There are many people, for instance, young people, who have stolen a cell phone and they go to jail for a year for stealing a cell phone. There was a young man who stole $20 in the bus and he was almost a month behind bars. There are a lot of cases of violence inside families, cases where a person attacks another member of their family, for example, their wife. The wife withdraws the claim next week, but the person continues in jail for many months, many months, even more than a year in some cases. There are people that take 60% of their term and then they are not promptly allowed to leave. They do so after 2 or 3 months. So it's absurd the way in which justice is being managed in our country. So once again, overcrowding, it's because, as I mentioned before, justice unfortunately considers pre-trial prison as the first element, not as the last one. 4 causes must be determined for someone to be taken into custody. But here, in this case, at the first reason, the justice decides to take the person to jail. For example, someone stole a phone or attacked someone else. Well, this person is a micro trafficker, so they go to jail. And in jail after proving innocent, when it should be the other way around. In my case, I was 77 days in jail, and I had to demonstrate my innocence within this moment. But I could have been able to demonstrate my innocence outside. It would have been a smaller load for the state. The state pays $250 every day for each person in prison. It's a contract with another company, and the way in which they look after prisoners, the way in which they feed prisoners, well, does not follow a contract as this. So there's overcrowding, there's mistreatment to the prisoners on behalf of the guides, on behalf of the officers, of all those who are in the different jails of the country. I was in the pre-trial center that is only for custody, but there are people who have a sentence for 2 or 3 years that are still there, when these people should be in jail in different parts of the country, regional jails, but they're still there. That's why there are over 2,000 people in that jail that only has capacity for 700.
Are you hopeful that the judicial system can change, or what, even better, what needs to change to have a better judicial system?
Well, a lot of things have to change. It has been constantly criticized that the previous government has justice kidnapped, but in these 2 years of government there have been a lot of doubt about legal independence, and even the president of the National Court of Justice has called for the independence of the judicial sector. When the members of the courts were named, and they wanted to keep aside members of the National Court of Justice in an unconstitutional way. I hope that this new council will be able to take enough steps to create independence with the executive branch. But I also aspire that everything has happened and that I will start telling this in some days. I hope that this will all help for a radical change in social rehabilitation. There's no such thing as social rehab. Unfortunately, jails become centers for perfecting crimes, and this has been evident. It has been discovered that in different jails of the country there are still people who are becoming criminals behind bars, important crimes behind bars, and this should not be allowed. People in jail need to have spaces for rehabilitation. For example, I had the option of taking a workshop of making boats with wood and other things, but we had to pay for our own materials, and without materials you don't have this possibility. There are cases of, for example, industrial mechanics, but there's no material for it. And other workshops of craftsmanship and whatnot, but if you don't have the materials or the possibilities, you are unable to do it. So the state should also think about self-management, so that through these possibilities there could be resources coming in, and personnel will have the possibility of being rehabilitated. There's a library in the jail that I was in where there's a possibility of studying in order to graduate high school and also take exams for university. And there must be more support on this, because it's the only way in which someone can live the sad moment that they are when they're in jail.
The process has different steps that needs to be taken. But there's also, and before we end, I want to ask you, there's also the issue about media, because it goes across different sectors as well. You were a victim, let's say, of media lynching, that it was in the communications law, and it's about to be changed with the reforms to the communication law in Ecuador. How is that possible? Are you going to ask for some kind of reparations from media? Because they were saying in the media, we followed your case throughout the whole process, and they were saying that you were guilty even before the whole process began.
Indeed, I believe that at their given moment they should start thinking about certain actions, certain measures, but it's futile. This has been created from the media. They exercise media power in the country. I consider this very difficult to see a possibility as such. So it's important for the media to also consider the other side. For example, my case will be useful to get to know more about social rehabilitation, to know how prisoners are being treated, how inmates are mistreated. Someone in jail is worth nothing there. And the media plays an important role there to get to the bottom of this. Why there is so much overcrowding? Why is justice taking so long? Why people that are still done with their time is still in jail? There must be an inventory of people in jail. Why have they been apprehended, and how much time will it take for them to be set free? It's very easy to become an inmate, but it's very difficult to leave a prison. After I had the sentence by the judge and I had the dismissal, it took me around 3 hours to leave the jail because the police did not have outdated information. They still had the pretrial detention in force, so this should all be automated. Whenever there's an order for someone to be set free, all the institutions should have an updated database that states that this person should no longer be in jail, and the measures against this person should be withdrawn. And this is a very big problem, because whenever you're accused of something and when you go to jail, there are certain measures against you. For example, account frozen. In my case, there were no problems because I had only $20 in my bank account, so there were no problems with that. But also taking away your assets. So basically you become a pariah, you're nothing. But withdrawing these measures is a problem. It does not happen automatically. You can be with your family driving your car, and if there's maybe a search of the police, if the order has not been withdrawn, you can go to jail because it has not been updated. So a lot of things need to be updated, and I think that this has to improve. There are very good things and negative things as well. And I think that this has been useful to see how rehab is doing in my country, to finally understand that justice must work better with this type of things, not with political affairs behind, but only seeing objectively how things are doing. And to say finally that the situation in the country must change, that we should no longer continue with this legal
turmoil. Thank you very much for your
turmoil.
time, Antonio. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. But it's very important to analyze this case and make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone, not journalist or any other person that is involved in a case like this.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I'm a journalist with a long career working with public, community and private media as well as official media. So as a journalist, I will continue working and trying to make things right eventually in our country. Hopefully this will be
possible. To journalist Marco Antonio Bravo on how lawfare is being used in Ecuador and what needs to be done to prevent innocent people from paying the price of a corruption witch hunt. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.